All right. Hey guys, Monty here, retired lawyer, active father, and today we're going to be talking about sleep training. So, this is the sleep training video. And it's actually great because in reviewing my notes and preparing for this, I realized that, sleep training is something that can and should be done in the second 3 months of your baby's life. So, in months 4 to 6. So it's appropriate that we're talking about it now. But let's start, and we got to start by. We have to begin by summarizing how we got here, and we have to do that because if you have not watched my video on sleeping through the night in the fourth trimester and sleep generally in the fourth trimester, then you're probably not going to be in a position to understand what I'm saying about sleep training today. And because even if you have seen that video, then there's some things that I want to kind of flesh out and clarify as we go along. So let's talk about the first 3 months sequentially, starting with the first month. And I'll talk to you about it using our baby as an example and our experience as an example. What's the name of the game in the first month? It's full feedings and good naps, as we've talked about. Full feedings and good naps. And what do good naps mean? They mean naps of approximately 90 minutes in duration. Motionless, quiet, other than a sound machine, perhaps. It doesn't need to be absolutely dead quiet, but, conditions for good quality naps of optimal duration, which is in the neighborhood of an hour and a half. Now, I've referred to that as a target before, and that's fine, but I think it's better described as a preferred floor because you can and should let your newborn nap longer than that. The only exception, I think, is, in the first month with newborns and breastfeeding babies in particular, but I would just say probably all babies, they need to feed every 4 hours or less, and they should not go more than 4 hours because they need to feed that often. And target cycle that we've been talking about throughout the series is 2.5 to 3 hours. But as I've said before, feel free to let your baby go longer. Don't wake him or her up ever, other than if it's approaching or at 4 hours from the start of the last feed in the last cycle, and you're dealing with a newborn in the first month of life. You should consider gently nudging him or her awake. Hopefully, and perhaps likely, they'll be coming out of their sleep anyway, and you can bring them to the breast and keep that good metabolic cycle going. After the first month of life, I think your doctors and nurses will tell you that a baby can go longer than 4 hours at that point. And incidentally, that's around the time that their day-night organization begins to fall into place, or just does fall into place. It's around the 4 to 6 week mark. And that's also in conjunction with that when you'll start to see a lengthening of one of those naps, at least, which is the late afternoon, early evening nap or evening nap that takes place roughly between 6 and 8 p.m. is when it starts. You'll see that nap begin to lengthen. 3 hours, 3.5 hours, 4.5 hours. But look, you may get a 3 hour nap in the first month, and that's okay. In fact, let me just give you a bunch of examples from our experience to kind of highlight this point. We got a 2 hour nap on day 5. I know that because we made a record of it. It was the first day that we were able to begin to keep better records, and I think by day 6, 7, we were keeping pretty decent records. Day 5 was a little spotty, but I noted that it was a 2 hour nap, and there may have been more 2 hour naps than just the one, but I noted that. And by the way, we measured our naps from the time we put the baby in the bassinet. He may have been asleep while we was changing his diaper, probably was on some occasions. They're just constantly asleep, passing out, constantly asleep around the clock. But we measured the naps from the time we actually put him down in the bassinet. Um, so that was how we did it. And on day 5, we got a 2-hour nap. On day 6, we got a 2-hour, 40-minute nap. And that was the one that we woke him up just before the 4-hour mark from the last feeding. It was like 3 hours, 58 minutes, and we were waiting and waiting. And we just decided to wake him up because it was basically at 4 hours, and we were trying to be, careful and conservative. He was 6 days old. We brought him to the breast, it worked out fine. That nap also was a 2-hour and 40-minute nap. I looked, and the prior cycle, the nap before that, was only 45 minutes long. So, only short nap, fed in a shorter time frame, maybe closer to the 2 or 2.5 hour mark, from the last feeding. And then that short nap maybe explained the long nap, because we fed him and basically put him down immediately or as quickly as we could. And he napped 2 hours and 40 minutes. The next day, day 7, we had a 2.5 hour nap. That nap followed a cycle in which there was not much sleep. And I did not note how long or short the sleep was, but I did note that there was not much sleep in the prior cycle, and then he got a 2.5 hour nap to make up for it. There was also another cycle that day, incidentally, where we fed after an hour and 53 minutes when there was 0 sleep. So no sleep that cycle. And I guess we tried, we were doing whatever we were doing. I mean, our entire lives were organized around the baby. So it's not like anything else was vying for our attention. But for whatever reason, there was no sleep. So an hour and 53 minutes after we had started the last feeding, we put him to the breast again. So not even 2 hours. Just goes to show what can happen in the first days or week or two. But then the following cycle, he got a 2-hour nap. And I think he got another 2-hour nap after that. I mean, it balanced out. At 2 weeks, he napped 3 hours in one cycle. It was a 3.8 hour cycle. So what is that? 3 hours, 48 minutes from feed to feed, during which he napped for 3 hours. That's fine. We didn't wake him up. I think he woke up on his own that time. There was only one time I remember where we woke him up affirmatively. So my point is that we got it all. Plenty of naps of all lengths, but they all centered around an hour and a half. And truth be told, God is my witness. I look at these records. They're not just pulling these figures out of thin air. These folks, Dr. Weisbluth, he knows what he's talking about. And that's what you should kind of hope or strive to, give your newborn as well, as good quality naps of whatever duration, really. I mean, just afford them ample opportunity to sleep and look for naps of about 90 minutes in length. Feeding cycles as well, as I've kind of touched on here, they can run from 2 hours to 3.5 hours, but they too should be, and you'll see that they'll be centered around 2.5 to 3 hours. I'll note something else about the first month is that my son was born 2 weeks before the due date. So at the end of the first month, say 4 weeks old, that's 2 weeks from the due date. The second half of the first month, looking over his records, I noticed that his naps became very regular, smooth, consistent, not interrupted, and more just days full of like hour and a half long naps. Hour 25 maybe one cycle, hour 1.75, 2, maybe 1, maybe 2 and change, but no short naps, no half-hour naps, no cycles, fewer cycles of missing naps or even 45-minute naps for the second half of the first month. Essentially from the time of his due date, his naps were pretty regular until we got to the second month. Now, he napped pretty well in the second month too. It's not that he didn't, but I'll tell you two things about the second month. First, just want to fast forward. By the end of the second month, we began seeing expanding nighttime sleep around 6 to 8 p.m. That nap began to enlarge and it began to assume the role of the nighttime bedtime sleep that would emerge as time went on. Between weeks 7 and 8 for us, so that would be between weeks 5 and 7, counting from the due date, we saw that nap start to lengthen. 3 hours plus, 3.5, 4 hours, 4.5 hours. On the day that he turned 8 weeks old, we got a 5-hour nap. And I'll just tell you about that one. It's, we put him down at 6:01 p.m. and we got a 5-hour nap. There's another wrinkle to that cycle that I'll get back to in a minute, but look for that. Experts will say that a baby's day-night organization falls into place around the 4 to 6 week mark, counting from the due date. And for us, it was about, between weeks 5 and 7. I'm sorry, 5 and 6, between weeks 5 and week 6 for us. So right there in that zone. Remember that 6 to 8 window, because it's going to figure prominently in our discussion today, because it's going to be the foundation for an early and appropriate bedtime for your infant and toddler and young child for the foreseeable future. If you want to, treat your baby's sleep with the respect it deserves. I'll talk more about early bedtimes in a minute. But there you go. By the end of the second month, that nighttime sleep pattern begins to emerge. The other thing I want to say about the second month for us is that we had to all of a sudden soothe our baby a lot more than we did in the first month, both to put him down, but also the naps began to fragment and he began to stir and wake up more. So we would have to soothe him to put him back down to try to ensure that he got the long enough, that he got enough sleep. And so we would have to do what we could to extend the naps. And that was a feature of the second month. And I'll just give you some examples because, I want you to understand how important it is to try not to give up on naps and, try to watch the video I did on troubleshooting, because if you're troubleshooting your baby well and you're able to distinguish between the different cries and cues, then you'll know that, if he's stirring during a nap, he's not hungry. He just needs to be soothed. And what he really needs most is to sleep some more. There could be any number of reasons why a newborn or a baby in the fourth trimester will stir. They have long periods of active REM-like sleep, for example. And if they're not swaddled, they're liable to bonk themselves in the head with one of their arms that are flailing around. And even if they are swaddled, there's all kinds of, brain activity and stuff going on where, they can just wake up. There could be loud noises, of course. Something could interrupt or interfere with their sleep, wake them up. You have to try to get them back down for a good quality nap. And I'm going to give you it's 6 examples here to demonstrate what can happen and what you can do that'll really make a difference between a good quality nap and a short and insufficient nap. So, for example, the day that our son entered his second month of life, the day that I think he was Yeah, the day after he turned 1 month old. No, it was actually the very day that he turned 1 month old. I was out of the house, but my wife was home, and we were both taking notes on this stuff, and it was. I'll never forget this because we put him down at 7:28 p.m. for a nap. He only went 3 minutes, and then he woke up. He stirred. Something happened. Um, she tried to soothe him, and it took a while. It apparently took 19 minutes. He might have fallen asleep in her arms, but by the time he was down in the bassinet, he slept from 7:50 to 7:57, or just another 7 minutes. Then he woke up again. He was up for 4 minutes. She got him back down, 8:01 to 8:10. And at this point, it's a total of 19 minutes of sleep because he gets up at 8:10 again, and he's only been down for 19 minutes. Inadequate for a nap by any measure. And for the fourth time, my wife, she was able to deduce and figure out that he's not hungry. It's not a growth spurt. It's not some weird, he wasn't exhibiting hunger cues, probably wasn't rooting. He wasn't crying. Sometimes it's like, you try to shush him or something and he just cries more desperately, almost as if to tell you, no, that's not it, Mom. No, that's not it, Dad. They can kind of communicate in these ways. Believe it, if you're paying attention. But he wasn't doing that, and she was able to deduce that it wasn't hunger. So she soothed him and put him back down, and guess what? 8:35, he slept until 9:50 p.m. for an hour and 15 minutes. Total cumulative sleep of an hour and a half, exactly 1.5 for that nap, and that was on the day that he entered the second month. At 5 weeks, just random examples, okay? There was one nap where he woke up after 38 minutes. We got him back down, and he went another hour and 29 minutes. Think about the difference between a nap that's over 2 hours and one that's 38 minutes long. And that's what he needed. He needed sleep is what he needed. He didn't need anything else in that moment. At 6 weeks, he went 48 minutes for one cycle, woke up, got him back down for 12 minutes, woke up again, soothed him and put him back down, and he slept a full hour from there. 6 weeks, at 6 weeks, in the 6th week, another cycle, 42 minutes, woke up. Then 6 minutes, woke up again. We're at 48 minutes now, but we put him down again. He went an hour and 35 minutes. Another example from the 6-week mark. We put him down for a nap. He napped for an hour and 8 minutes. And for whatever reason, I don't recall why. All I have are the records now. I don't know why we were ascertained that an hour and 8 minute nap was not enough and that he just needed more sleep. But somehow we were able to, see that. And we got him back down, and he napped for an hour and 22 minutes. At 8 weeks, 12 minutes, then 27 minutes, then 18 minutes. That adds up to 57 minutes, almost an hour. Not a bad nap. There are plenty of cycles a baby will nap that amount, Weissblum says an hour to an hour and a half, but an hour and a half being the preferred floor. There we were at 57 minutes, if I'm doing the math correctly, but we got him back down for some reason, for whatever reason, we got him back down, and he slept an hour and 22 minutes. Now, if we had spotted hunger cues or cries, or if he had just been persistently or insistently crying, then A, he wouldn't have gone down, and B, we probably wouldn't have pressed the issue. But we didn't give up on the naps. We did what we could to try to extend the naps, and it really, really paid off when this baby slept another hour and 22 minutes, again, in this example, just like the example I just gave. And by the way, that nap at the 8-week mark that he went 5 hours, that it was actually 4.9 hours. Here's what happened there. We put him down. This is the wrinkle I mentioned a minute ago or a few minutes ago. We put him down at 6:01 p.m. Bedtime, so to speak. Slept until 6:08, 7 minutes, woke up. Put him back down 6:11 to 8:05 p.m. Woke up after an hour and 54 minutes. We knew by that point that that nap, even 2 hours at that point, was insufficient because we were seeing naps of 3 to 4 hours. So we put him back down. He slept, where is it? He slept 8:08 to 8:13, 5 minutes, and he stirred and got up again for some reason. We put him back down, 8:24 p.m. to 8:39 p.m. He got up again. And we got him down again. And he slept from 8:47 p.m. to 11:24 p.m. for 2 hours and 37 minutes. And for a total of 4.9 hours, or basically 5 hours, which is what he needed. Now, again, bear in mind, that we many times we pulled the plug on naps after 42 or 54 minutes. I don't know about many times, but yeah, many times. Not the majority of times, though. I'm just saying it happened. It clearly happened. I didn't tabulate exactly how many times, but we got our share of naps that were shorter, less than an hour. Like I said, 42 minutes, 54 minutes. And we probably tried to ascertain if he was hungry or not. And we resolved our doubts in favor of pulling the plug on the nap. I'll give one example of that. There was a nap he slept for 7 minutes, he woke up, put him down for 35 more minutes, woke up again, put him back down for 7 more minutes. 7 plus 35 plus 7 is 49. And we pulled the plug. Why? I can't tell you right now exactly why in that instance. So it does vary, but don't give up on naps and try to extend them unless or until you see and observe otherwise. In the 3rd month, at 9 weeks, he was closing in on 6 hours. I think he got a 5.7 hours sleep at 9 weeks, maybe the day he turned 9 weeks old or something like that, for that long night nap, if you can call it a nap at this point. At 10 weeks, he was flirting with 7 hours. And as I mentioned before, at 10 and a half weeks, he hit 8 hours, 7.9 hours, specifically the first night, and 8.4 hours the next day, incidentally. But even then, he would go down and sleep that long, but we would constantly, he would stir. Not every time, but oftentimes, and we would constantly soothe him back to sleep if he hadn't slept long enough. He was taking a pacifier to bed, and the pacifier might fall out in the middle of the night just because he's asleep, and then somehow it's like he just kind of subliminally or physiologically just detects it because it's just not in his mouth, and that causes him to stir. Or maybe there's other reasons, for any number of reasons why he might awaken or stir, and we would go in and soothe them. Until we got to the 3-month mark, when we decided to do some sleep training. So that's what I'll talk about now. I'm going to talk about nighttime sleep training and daytime nap training. And I'll start with nighttime sleep training, and I'll just tell you what we did. We nighttime sleep trained our boy the night before he turned 3 months old or 13 weeks old. We didn't choose that night for that reason. The reason why it came to pass that we did it that night is because we had noticed in the days and nights before that our son was showing signs of training, or he was starting to train us, because we would put him down at the bedtime hour, that 6 to 8 period roughly, and we weren't even necessarily shooting for that at that point, but that's how experts will say or suggest that sleep patterns will emerge, as I've said. And looking back at the records, that really was kind of how it played out. I mean, sometimes it would be that long night sleep would begin after 8 o'clock, but that 6 to 8 window was pretty accurate. In any event, when we would go to put him down at that time, he would have his pacifier in his mouth, and I would be shushing him and stuff. And, maybe we got the sound machine turned on in the room, and I would go to put him in the crib. We noticed that he was purposely kind of spitting out that pacifier to get our attention and get me to come back, because it would happen right at the beginning of the night before he even fell asleep. And I'd put him down, I'd go to leave before I even get to my bedroom, my wife and I, our bedroom down the hall. She would see on the monitor, and I would hear fussing and maybe even crying because he spit out the pacifier. So I'd go back, put the pacifier back in, and sometimes before I got to the bedroom, or by the time I got to the bedroom, he was at it again. And we were able to figure out, at this point, he's got extended wake times now. He's more conscious and alert. We know our kid, and it was evident to us that he was basically trying to communicate with us, and he was figuring out that if this pacifier goes out, mommy and daddy will come back in. So it's not that we set out to do it any particular night, but we had read in Weissbluth, Dr. Weissbluth's book, that a sweet spot for sleep training is in the 4th month, because babies, if they're growing and are healthy and things are going well, that's when they will begin to exhibit more self-agency, which means the capacity to understand that they can protest, they can express themselves, and that they can that they can understand that you'll respond to their behavior. So that's what I said kind of tongue-in-cheek a minute ago about he was training us. He was conditioning us to come back because he didn't want to go to sleep just yet. He wanted to spend more time with mommy and daddy. And he didn't understand that what he really needed to do was sleep, and that tomorrow was going to be a new day, and he would see us again, and we could pick up where we left off. So that night, I probably happened 2 or 3 times before we pulled the plug on it. He spit out the pacifier. The 3rd time, I just took the pacifier with me, and didn't look back. Walked away, and we let him cry it out. Now, you may read a lot online about different methods of sleep training. People will refer to the cry it out method, sometimes referred to as the extinction method. I think neither that term or phrase is, maybe the best way of putting it, because it's got, connotations that might put people off, letting a baby cry it out, or extinction, whatever that means. But truly, it is the natural way. If you think back on human history, antiquity, it is the natural way for babies to learn to self-soothe and fall asleep on their own and put themselves back to sleep. And doctors, nurses, and experts that you will talk to will tell you that it is a safe, fast, and effective way of teaching your baby to sleep through the night. The more you have put your baby down drowsy but awake in the time leading up to this, the more you have put him on his back in his own bed space and conditioned him to sleep in his own bed space, the more you've given him full feedings, and he's growing and thriving. And I don't know, I think the better rested he is at that point, the better he'll be able to cope with the sleep training and the less crying you'll experience. The longer you wait and the fewer self-soothing techniques or methods you've taught him or kind of instilled in him up until that point, it may take longer. Many of the experts and consultants that we've come across have said that a typical sleep training, protocol, essentially letting a baby cry it out for one or more nights, however many nights, until they learn to just, hey, it's time to go to sleep. Daddy gives you a nice kiss, puts you in your crib. Lots of love all day long and all night long. But now with all this love, it's time to sleep, and I'm walking out the door and, not coming back, because we want you to, learn and understand over time that it's sleep time now, and there's, you don't want me to come back because you want to go to sleep too, and that's what we do right now. I lost my train of thought, but the fourth month is kind of the sweet spot for that, because they're able to understand that. And the longer you wait, they will just have more of the self-agency and the power of protest. And you're going to have more of fussiness and resistance on your hand. And imagine if you're trying to sleep train a baby in the second half of the year, 9 months old, 12 months old, or a toddler who's now mobile, may be able to get out of the crib on their own. It becomes more and more difficult. So while it may strike many as very early to do that kind of thing, and I recall that, for example, the What to Expect series of books, they defer sleep training until the second half of the first year. I don't think so. I think if things are proceeding reasonably well and you've listened and watched all the videos that up until this point, but in particular the fourth trimester and sleeping video that I put out, then you'll understand why I agree with Dr. Weisbluth that, in that fourth month, it's kind of a good time. I think he would say sleep training should take place between the fourth and sixth month, and that it becomes harder the longer you wait after that. And even after the fourth month, he kind of, I think somewhere in the book, he drew a kind of a dividing line at the 4-month mark between early, easier time, which is really just that fourth month, and after the fourth month, just increasing difficulty or complexity trying to do sleep training for your kid. What happened in our case, because of the things we had done right up until that point, our sleep training took one night. Our kid cried for maybe 20 minutes that night. In all likelihood, it probably wasn't even that long. It probably wasn't even 15 minutes. At the time, I think we were apprehensive because we didn't know how long it was going to last, and we didn't know what was going to be in store for us the following night and every night after that. And it was difficult to hear him cry. But once he stopped crying and fell asleep, as he was bound to, he didn't wake up again that night. And guess what? Every single night, I swear to you, every night after that, I put this baby down, drowsy but awake. I almost never asleep. He was always awake, and he would just, I walked out of that room, there was no fussing or crying. So much so that I think a few nights in, when we saw how successful it was, usually I would like, as I was walking him to his room and to his crib. I remember, like a week into this, dancing out of his room, dancing into the bedroom, dancing with my wife, like, because it was so magical and awesome that we just put this kid down. Sound machine was probably on, but like no fussing, no crying. Maybe he didn't fall asleep immediately, but he fell asleep on his own without any fussing or crying. And sometimes he did just fall right asleep like a dream. So that was nighttime sleep training for us. and it worked out beautifully. Daytime naps. Daytime naps, according to Dr. Weisbluth, begin to develop around 3 months, and they're well established by 6 months. These are daytime naps. It's a pattern of 2 or 3 naps that help your baby get through the day, get to that bedtime. And hopefully it's an early bedtime, 6 to 8 p.m. Closer to 6, if your baby misses the afternoon nap, for example, or you just know your baby and he looks tired and he's ready for bed. Closer to 8, if maybe he got an afternoon nap and he's not tired until 7 or 7:30. But there's 2 or 3 naps that emerge um, in the between months 3 and 6. There's a morning nap, there's a midday nap, and there's an afternoon, late afternoon cat nap or insurance nap, I'll call it. I'll start with that cat nap, insurance nap, because it's more irregular than the other two. It disappears the soonest. For most babies, it's gone between months 6 and 9. I think for almost all babies, it's gone by 9 months. There's only 2 naps for almost every baby at that point. And it's irregular. It's kind of transient. We definitely got our share of that third afternoon nap. And it all depended on the flow of the day, because let's say there's the morning and the midday naps are short, they definitely probably need an afternoon nap. And so it's kind of wise to think about those 3 naps as being in place at the beginning of this, 3-month period. But sometime between months 6 and 9, that third nap will disappear. For our son, it was around the 5-month mark. By 5.5 months or 5 months and 1 week, it was gone. And I think it was because he was so rested by that point that he only needed the morning and midday naps. And we didn't bother with the late afternoon nap after that. So what happens when that late afternoon nap disappears is you have your longest period of wakefulness for the entire day from about 2 to 6 p.m. It's this afternoon period, and let's say your kid is 5-6 months old, right? That's the time now where, boy, you can go on extended excursions more often, with this baby in tow, because you have a 4-hour block of time where he's awake and he's happy to be awake. It's right for him to be awake, and he's fully alert. But anyway, the late afternoon nap is from approximately 3 to 4 p.m. None of these times are set in stone, but you don't want it to go too much later than 4 p.m. You may want to even wake your kid up, depending on the flow of the day, or perhaps irrespective of the flow of the day, because even if he's cranky, you're kind of safeguarding bedtime, that early bedtime of 6 to 8, because that's the long nap. That's that long nighttime sleep now. That's just going to get longer and longer. And it's the most restorative, beneficial sleep. That's the priority. The naps are a pillar of healthy sleep habits, but they're a pillar because they help the baby get through the day so that they can get to that early bedtime. Let's talk about the morning nap. The morning nap, as between the morning and the midday nap, the morning nap develops first. So these nap patterns emerge between months 4 and 6. The morning nap develops first, and Dr. Weisbluth kind of puts that nap at around 9 a.m. Doesn't mean that's when your baby's going to nap necessarily. It's just kind of a rough guidepost, and it turns out to be really, really a useful one. At least it was for us, but I imagine it will be for many people, because I don't think Dr. Weisbluth pulls this stuff out of the air. I mean, I think it's based on a lot of science and a lot of time spent with a lot of newborns and infants sleeping. What 9 a.m. means is that, if you consider an early bedtime of between 6 and 8, after about 12 weeks from the due date, your baby, around that time, he will have dropped the last midnight feeding, and he'll have the capacity to sleep 10 to 12 hours. So if you put him down between 6 and 8, let's say you put him down at 6 and he gets up at 6 a.m., um, he'll only be able to hang for so long, and so he'll be ready for a nap around 9 a.m. Now, in the beginning, when you're closer to the 3 month mark, let's say, it probably won't be 9 a.m. It will be closer to 8 a.m., maybe even sooner than that. That morning nap is almost a continuation of night sleep, according to Weissbluth. So your baby gets up at 6 a.m. He can have maybe about 2 hours of wakefulness, but then he's ready for that morning nap. And he might go down at 8 a.m., and that's okay. 9 a.m. is just something to kind of, what you'll see is over time, as a baby matures, the times will drift forward so that you're closer to 9 a.m. And then guess what? When you're starting to drop the morning nap, the start time for that nap will drift towards 10 a.m. And you'll start to see that the naps start later like that. And then you may even see that it's kind of, sometimes some days it's hard to get them to go down for that nap, or increasingly it is. And you might decide at that point, he's getting close to being ready to drop that morning nap. According to Weissbluth's research, or his book anyway, by 9 months, 4% of babies have dropped the morning nap by 9 months, so very few. By 12 months, only 17% have dropped the morning nap. By 15 months, so a year and 3 months, 56%, or a majority of babies, have dropped the morning nap. And by 18 months, 77%, or 3/4, have. Our son dropped the morning nap at 9 months. He was one of the few. We think it's because he was so very rested at that point, and we did not force him to drop the nap, and we didn't force him to drop the midday nap down the road either. We never did anything like that. We let him lead the way, and it became evident to us that it was time, because the morning nap was starting closer to 10 a.m., or I could look at the records, maybe even after 10 a.m. And like I said, some days it was hard to get him to go down for that. So I remember the first time we dropped the morning nap, we shifted the midday nap up. We advanced it earlier because he wasn't going to be able to hang until 12 or 1 p.m., which is kind of the same rough target for the midday nap that 9 a.m. is for the morning nap. I remember the day we dropped the morning nap, we put him down for the midday nap at 11 a.m. And we were just hoping for a good lengthy nap to get us to bedtime, because we weren't doing afternoon naps at that point. He was 9 months old. And he slept for 2 hours until 1 p.m. So early wake up from a midday nap, but a long, solid nap. And he woke up at 1 p.m. and that solid nap helped him get to 6 p.m., just barely, I think. And we got him down at 6 p.m. and he slept until 6 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. or something like that. And beautiful. We were done with the morning nap. Over time, that midday nap, the start time shifted from 11 a.m. later and later and later. It got closer to 12 p.m. and eventually 1 p.m. The final resting spot for the midday nap, according to Weissbluth, is 1 p.m. But again, don't look at that in the beginning, and don't look at 9 a.m. as some kind of a fixture in the beginning with the morning nap either. I just think they're useful ideas to have in mind, and they turn out to be fairly good approximations of an infant's biological sleep rhythms or patterns, according to the eminent Dr. Weissbluth. God bless him. Consider that the midday nap is around 1 p.m. in its final kind of resting spot, where it kind of lands in the end. But it's somewhere from 12 to 1 p.m. and it could even be earlier, including, in the beginning when the nap patterns first begin to emerge. They might all tend to be kind of brief and somewhat irregular. Maybe the morning nap is short, 8 a.m. to 8:30 or something like that. 8:45 can't get them to sleep longer. And then the midday nap may need to begin before 12 p.m. Um, but it typically takes place between 12 and 1 p.m. The midday nap develops after the morning nap, and it's the longest lasting nap. It'll stay with you, and it should stay with you until your kid is about 3 to 5 years old. I would say 3 is early. Our son began to drop the midday nap on or about his third birthday, but I would submit to you that he was as well rested a 3-year-old as has ever, lived and breathed. And he'd gotten all of his naps and nighttime sleep damn near every day up until that point. And guess what? The process of dropping that nap, while it may have begun on his third birthday, it wasn't until his fourth birthday on or about, almost precisely. It's kind of cool how it worked out that way, but it was on his fourth birthday, almost to the day, where we said, you know what, we're done with it now. But he still took that midday nap for most of that fourth year. It would not have been wise to drop it at 3 years. Probably not appropriate or optimal to drop it at 3.5 years. But it made sense at the 4-year mark. And from the time he turned 4 and we dropped that final midday nap, my son has never taken a daytime nap a single day since. And I mean, that's not a, feather in my cap. I'm just, at that point, it's like he did not need to nap a single day. He was done with it. However it goes for you and your family, it doesn't really matter. It's not a race to see who can, be done with naps the quickest. It really doesn't matter because naps can, if your kid's napping until he's 5, I think that's fine. I remember being in kindergarten when I was a kid, they would roll out these mats, in the afternoon, and there would be nap time. And I think they still do it in Montessori's and preschools and kindergarten level grade schools, and it's good. It doesn't really matter as long as your kid is getting the sleep that he or she needs. That's what I would emphasize the most. And naps are a pillar and a foundation of healthy sleep for your kid because they'll help them get through the day until they don't need to anymore. Try to keep the bedtime early and try to respect the naps. And if you don't remember anything else, remember those two things. Keep the bedtime early and respect the naps. Nap training. So we talked about nighttime sleep training. The last thing I'll talk about is daytime nap training. This was a lot tougher for us than the nighttime sleep training. It was pretty brutal, and I think it's because we made some mistakes, and I'm happy to share those mistakes with you. I would say that I would try to look for daytime nap training in sometime in months 4 through 6. I would wait for your baby to be sleeping through the night. If, assuming, let's just say you're there when we were there, which is at the 3-month mark, not only was he sleeping through the night, defined as 7 to 8 hours of continuous nighttime sleep, but as I've said, by the 12-week mark, he dropped the final midnight feeding and he was going 10 to 12 hours for his nighttime sleep. I would wait for that to happen, for him to drop that last nighttime feed. But I would start with the nap training sooner than later in this 3 to 6 month period, because the longer you wait, it just won't get easier. It'll get more difficult because it'll take longer for your baby to adjust to that new reality, and he'll have more power to protest and cry, and he'll be more accustomed to the way things have been, or you soothing him to sleep or going back to soothe him each time, and he'll begin to train you, as I said. That's what we spotted with our son, that it was either we were going to coach and guide him and train him, or he was training us to keep coming back and giving him more attention. I would start with the morning nap because it develops first. Start with the morning nap and train for that, then do the midday nap. Weissbluth will tell you you don't really need to train for the afternoon nap. It's such a kind of fleeting, transient thing to begin with. But he says for the afternoon nap, if you need it, just put your baby down. And if he cries, you know, abort the nap entirely. Or if you know he needs to sleep because the morning and midday naps were bad, for example, then just maximize sleep by, getting him the sleep he needs as much as he needs to get to bedtime, and hopefully not too much so that it interferes with bedtime. But Weissbluth says don't really worry about the afternoon nap so much. Train for the morning nap and train for that first because it's the first nap that develops, and do it in this way. Put the baby down drowsy but awake and let him fall asleep on his own. If he's fussing or crying, let him cry it out until he falls asleep on his own. Within days, he'll understand that that's the time that the room has been darkened, things are quiet. I'm hearing familiar ocean sounds or whatever's playing on the sound machine. We've gone through this pre-nap routine. Mommy's told me that she loves me, and I know it's time to sleep, and I know that they don't respond to my cries at this time, so I might as well just fall asleep and let it feel good. How long should you let a baby cry for naps? Weissbluth says up to an hour. By the way, he says there is, and experts will say this, there's no limit for the cry it out method when it comes to nighttime sleep, because they need to sleep 10 to 12 hours. So, they will give in to their biological need for sleep soon enough. They will not cry all night, okay? They will pass out eventually. And if you're, committed to establishing, good nighttime sleep habits and getting your kid to sleep, ripping off 10 to 12 hours of uninterrupted sleep, then you'll let them cry it out. There's no limit for nighttime sleep, but there is a limit for daytime nap training because naps are only so long, and so it doesn't make sense to let a kid cry for longer than an hour. But he says you can let him go up to an hour. We kind of made a mistake during our 7-day, 1-week period of daytime nap training. I let my kid go longer than an hour, not because I was purposely doing it. I mean, I'd read Weissbluth's book cover to cover probably more than once, but such a doing the best I could, and I made that mistake. I just I didn't I probably wouldn't let him go more than an hour if I could do it again. But guess what? He wasn't traumatized by it. Nothing bad came out of it. It wasn't it didn't matter in the end, and I certainly didn't let him go too much more than an hour. Not suggesting you just let a baby cry for 2 hours. But Dr. Weissbluth says, let him go for up to an hour. He probably falls asleep before then. If he has the more self-soothing skills and the more you've kind of helped habituate him to these skills up until that point, the easier time you'll have. But at some point, he'll probably fall asleep. If he doesn't, then after an hour, you can pick him up, open the blinds, let a lot of daytime light come in, be active, play with him, take him outside, take him in the sun. But then, push the next cycle up and put him down sooner after the next feeding so that he can make up for the nap that he missed. If the baby does fall asleep with or without crying, he cries or not, but say he cries and then he falls asleep. Weissbluth says if he wakes up and it's less than 30 minutes, and especially substantially less than 30 minutes, so that it for sure it's not an adequate nap, Weissbluth says you can either go in, soothe, and put him down again, or just let him cry for another 30 minutes, not more than that, but just give the kid 30 minutes, see if he can fall asleep on his own. Give him that gift, because within days, I tell you, he will learn that it's okay. He'll just he'll learn eventually, and honestly, within a day. For us, it was a week total, and I think it took that long because we didn't do certain things right, but it won't be that long in the end, overall, in the overall scheme of your kid's life, and you will have imparted an amazing gift to him or her, which is going down for naps and falling asleep peacefully on their own. And if something does wake them, they can put themselves back to sleep quietly and peacefully on their own. They'll be healthier and happier because of it. So again, for the nap training, if the nap is substantially less than 30 minutes and they wake up and they're crying, give them another 30 minutes of crying, see if they can settle themselves and put themselves back down. Alternatively, go in and soothe them, but then put them back down and give them up to 30 minutes and see if they fall asleep on their own. If not, then fine. Pick them up, get them out in the sun, get them out in some bright light, play with them, do whatever. But then, put them down sooner after the next feeding, let's say, because they're going to be tired, and try to maximize sleep the rest of the day, and just try it again the next day for the morning nap. Now, what if they sleep more than 30 minutes? Well, Weissbluth says if it's more than 30 minutes or substantially more than 30 minutes, the closer it is to an hour, the more likely it is that it's maybe just a short nap, but they're not going to sleep more this cycle, so it's not worth it to let them cry another 30 minutes. If it's substantially more than 30 minutes, and it's a bit of a judgment call, how much more than 30 minutes, I don't think you're going to traumatize or harm your baby by getting these minute, calls or judgment calls wrong. But let's say it's, 45 minutes long. And they wake up and they're crying. Well, not optimal. It's not an hour. It's not an hour and a half. Weissbluth says you could either just abort, and call it a nap, and wait for the next midday nap to come along. And hopefully that's a longer nap. And oftentimes we would see that if the morning nap is short, then the midday nap would be long. 45 minutes in the morning, all of a sudden it's 2 hours for the midday, or sometimes the morning nap would be an hour and a half. 2 hours maybe, and then the midday nap would be short, because that's just the flow of the day. But Weissbluth says you could try, if it's, let's say, 45 minutes, go in, soothe, put the baby down, and see if he goes back to sleep. But if there's any crying, then just pick him up and abort the nap. And alternatively, you could just call it a nap at that point and maximize sleep the rest of the day. You will want to do that same, you want to take those same steps when you're training for the midday nap. It's no different, but here's some mistakes that we made. We started daytime nap training 2 days after the nighttime sleep training. So that would be a day after our son turned 3 months or 13 weeks old. Pretty early. It's in the very beginning of the 4th month, so not too early, according to Dr. Weissbluth. But in hindsight, had I known that within a week he was likely to drop the midnight feeding and go 10 to 12 hours in nighttime sleep, I might have, I would have waited. And even if it wasn't too early to start the daytime nap training, we did the morning nap training and the midday nap training at the same time in the same week. And I can't tell you why we did that. I was kind of taking the lead on this stuff. And I think I'm proud of my efforts. I think we did well, but I'd, kind of been pouring over Weissbluth myself. And like I said, I took the lead with it. Obviously, my wife had everything to say about it too, but, I'll take responsibility for that. I don't, because I'd read the book, and he said, going back and reviewing it, he says, start with the morning nap first, then do the midday. It might be tough to do them both in infants much younger than 6 months, but that's what I did, and probably wouldn't do it that way. If I could do it over again, I would have waited 3 months and 1 week for the nighttime sleep to be fully in place, and the nighttime sleep training to have been done and in place for a week at that point. And then I would have started with the morning nap, trained for that, then given that a week or two, and then done the midday nap training. I think we still would have been before the 4-month mark, or maybe right at the 4-month mark. And that would have been a better way to go. So made some mistakes, weren't far off the mark. And you know what? Most importantly, looking back, I have no regrets, because I will tell you that week was brutal. And our baby cried more than he had the first 3 months of his life in that 1 week. And it took a full week of crying, maybe 2 days that were good in terms of falling asleep, staying asleep, good naps, whatever. Like 3-4 days that were just brutal. too much crying. You know, it was very difficult to bear. But at the end of it, and I shit you not, on the day that we decided, that's it, we're gonna stop this little project, we can't take it anymore. You know, we were gonna call it off. The next day, we saw breakthroughs, beautiful breakthroughs, where we put this guy down for a morning nap, went right to sleep like a dream. Midday nap, same thing, and we never looked back. It was somewhat strange that, I mean, it was literally the next day after we said, forget it, we can't do it. Um, um, there was another mistake I made that I have to mention, and it may have caused us, it may have factored into why it took 7 days full rather than a shorter amount of time, because it was like day 2 or 3. And he had woken early from a nap, and he was crying, and then he was fussing, and then he was kind of quiet, and it wasn't clear whether he was up or not. You know, we were looking at the monitor, but it wasn't clear. And I went into the room, and it turned out he was awake, and he saw me with his eyes, and his eyes got large, and he started crying and screaming like bloody murder. I mean, like just crying to high heaven. And I think it was because it was like, oh, he'd been crying to try to get my attention, and he wasn't asleep. And then he saw that I had responded. So, you know, that's the trick. It's like if you respond, you're setting yourself back. You're reinforcing the training that the baby, is trying to do to you, mom and dad, to not purposely or, maliciously. I mean, they're pure and innocent, but it will just condition him to cry longer because he thinks that you'll respond. You're going to make those kinds of mistakes too. I don't feel bad about it. I mean, it's, you do the best you can. In hindsight, had I not responded so quickly then, maybe it wouldn't have taken 7 full days. But I will tell you, 7 full days of daytime nap training, as difficult and arduous as it was, after that, for the rest of my kid's life, he went to bed on time every day for his naps, got every morning nap that he needed, got every midday nap for all intents and purposes. I'm sure there were outlier days, but we were fully committed, and he got all the naps that he needed until he didn't need them anymore. Um, and it's it's paid off big time. It's made him the wonder and joy that he is today. And I wish the same for you. Please let me know if you have any questions about any of this, and take care. I'll see you next time.